All right, welcome back to Fusion Friday. Today what we're going to be doing is creating this little clamp assembly. First, we're going to just reinstate inserting some McMaster-Carr components into our designs, but we're also going to explore a new feature when we're assigning joints called a motion link. What a motion link does is it allows us to define um, two joints so that when one joint is activated in Fusion, the other one also works in tandem with it. So what we can do in Fusion 360 is we can model that out. So if we assign motion links to our design, we can go ahead and if we were to grab our slider and move it, we see that our screw also turns in the direction that we want it to as it opens and closes. And also the bottom screw down here. We'll do the same exact thing and assign some motion links to this as well. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer video because I am going to go through and actually model out each component that we see here. So if you want to skip ahead to the part where we're just assigning the joints and the motion links, feel free to if you want to try modeling out each of these components on your own. You do have the drawings in your OneNote. So let's jump right into it. If I were to go and create this model, the first thing that I notice in these drawings is that the dimensions from this part of my base of my clamp to this part of the little clamp itself, they actually share the same exact dimensions. So what I'm going to do when I'm modeling this out is I'm actually going to create one sketch of this kind of front view of my clamp base there that has both this part and also the front part of my little clamp here. All right, so if I go back into my Fusion and I go ahead and I create a new sketch, I am going to start with just trying to create the rough shape that I see in the base of the bracket. I'm not going to worry about it being perfect just yet. I'm going to come back in and change my dimensions. However, I just want to get that kind of rough general shape going of my design here. So we've got this down to here, over here, under there, up there, bang. Okay, this isn't perfect. However, we can always come back in and add our dimensions. So first thing I want to do, I know that this corner is in line with this little edge here. That's going to be a helpful reference point. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that a horizontal constraint. And now I'm going to go ahead and start adding in all the dimensions that I see. So I see that this is 10. I see that from here to the very top is 35. Okay, that kind of shrunk it down a little bit, but we can go ahead and drag our lines to just adjust things. I see that this dimension here is 10. That kind of got rid of my angle, so I'll just move this over. This dimension here I see is 20. This dimension here I also see is 10. And I see that this one has an angle of 135 degrees. And then I think the last thing that I just need to do is give this one a dimension of 20. Here we go. This dimension right here. This is meant to be 10. Okay, so we've got that. Now our top part is fully constrained. Now let's go back down and focus on our bottom part. So I notice this little line is also not constrained. I'm going to give that its dimension of 60. And working my way down, I know that this is 45. I know that this one is 10. This little guy right here is 25. This one is 30. We're making some good progress here. From here to here is 15. And I think that is our full sketch constrained. Okay, now what I want to do is I just want to create a mirror of just this side of it to act as the other portion of my clamp. So to do that, I'm simply going to draw in another line from here straight down and just make that a construction line by pressing the X key while hovered over that line. Then I can create a mirror of all of these features. And what I might have to do first is I might actually have to split this. Now I'm only going to be mirroring this face. So if I click on now, these lines, these lines, these lines. Oop, don't want that center line. I just want that one there. And mirror them about this center line. You'll see that it creates, now I have both of those little features. And I'm going to go ahead and just trim away that little thing. And now we're all good. So now you see we have our kind of general shape here. We have the base that's meant to be one part, and then we can go back in as a separate extrusion and extrude out the little clamp. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll extrude out our base first, and the overall thickness of this is going to be 30. And since I know this is going to be an assembly, I'm just going ahead and create it as a new component right off the bat and rename my component as the base. Okay, to rename or to re-extrude, I'm going to reveal my sketch again. And then now I'm going to start by extruding out this little clamp, also 30, and it defaults to join. However, I also want this to be a new component. So now I am all good, and I have this sort of general shape that I'm looking for. Okay. I'm not quite done with either one of these two parts. However, I'm just going to go ahead and, well, first of all, rename this to the clamp. But now I'm just going to hide one of them, and I'm going to add in the features that are necessary to finish off each one of these little features here. Okay, so I'm going to start with the base. I'm going to go ahead and hide my clamp for now and hide this sketch again. So we'll just start with a new sketch along this face here. And I'm going to go ahead and project both this face and this face here. So I'm just going to find my little midpoint, draw a line that goes straight down, and I'm drawing a circle. I want to be drawing a line. So draw a line that goes straight down, click on the X key to make it a dashed line, and then create my circle at the midpoint of that line. And since we have an M10 screw, for now, I'm going to add in a 10mm hole. And then another thing that we're going to do in this feature also is we're actually going to use the thread tool to create those M10 threads along our part there. Okay. And then the last thing I want to do is just add in those little triangles. So if I'm looking at this, I see that I will also be creating a mirrored image. So this line will also serve as a good mirror line. But I'm just going to add in my two little triangles here and give them the dimensions that they need. So from here to here, this is 6. From here to here, this is 2. And from here to here, this is 3. And the last thing that I need is just to make these two perpendicular. That should make everything all good, because since it's a 45-degree angle, this will be 90 degrees. Okay, and then we can go ahead and just mirror this onto the other side. So 1, 2, and then our mirror line right there. And now we've got it, everything that we need in this sketch. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish this. And we'll do a couple of extrusions here. First thing we'll extrude is the rails themselves. So we'll go ahead and we'll extrude that back to the 40. That gets it in line with this edge here. And click OK. And then the last thing that we need is to extrude out the hole itself. So I'll reveal my sketch again, and I will now extrude the hole all the way back and through. And something that I actually want to do, I'm going to actually hold off because I'm looking at my base, and the base also has this exact same feature. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal my clamp, or excuse me, the clamp, not the base. So I'm going to reveal my clamp. Then when I extrude this, I'm going to do it all in one operation. So that way I cut through both of those holes at exactly the same spots. That way I don't have to come back in and do it again later. So now we're nice and good. So I'll go ahead and hide my sketch and hide my clamp again. And now I've got everything that I need on this face. And what I want to do is now go ahead and add in my threads. And I will actually do this for both of these as well, because both of these are going to be threaded. Okay. To add in threads into Fusion, you go into Create and then down to Thread. Now, Fusion is pretty smart. If you give it a 10 millimeter hole, when you click on it, it'll automatically designate to a 10 millimeter hole and then the M10 by 1.5. And remember, if you're looking at a screw, this by 1.5 is the thread pitch. So that's exactly what we want. And we will just go ahead, we will model it. You don't have to model it, but we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we see we have those threads nicely placed in our little hole there. So we'll just go ahead and create a thread for this one as well. Thread. And again, we'll make it that same M10 by 1.5. And it's now all good. So now we have our threads on the base and our threads on the clamp. So we'll go ahead and we'll hide our clamp because we don't need it right now. Okay, before I move on to adding those last dimensions in the clamp, I want to go ahead and create a little hole down here that I need for that bottom screw. So to do that, I'm going to create one more sketch along the bottom here. And if I'm looking at it from the bottom, I will go ahead and just create my circle. And this one is not going to be in the midpoint because we have to account for the wall thickness that's going on right here. So I'm going to start with my 10 millimeter screw because again, we're working with an M10. And then I'm going to dimension this from here to here is 12.5. And from here to here is 15. And we'll just go ahead and extrude that and then also give that one a thread. And then we will be all done with the base. So extrude, thread, hole, M5, modeled, boom. Now we have our fully modeled out base, which is always a grand old time. I'm going to actually leave everything where it is right here. Because if I look over at my drawings, I see that my base has an offset of 0.5 millimeters from the base rail. So that's going to actually be very helpful for me. Because if I go back and reveal my clamp, what I can do is as I'm modeling this out, I can reference the shape that I just created along my clamp face there before I go ahead and hide this and then extrude everything. So what I'll do is I'll start by creating a sketch on the back side of my clamp. And then I'm going to project this little rail shape that I made and just click OK. Now I could go ahead and hide the clamp. I'm gonna be done with that for now. Or not the clamp, the base. So now you see we've got this little shape already defined for us, which is going to be very helpful because what we could do is we could come in and use our offset tool, create an offset of this edge by 0.5 millimeters. I'm just going to come in and trim away at some of these lines that I don't need. And the only ones that I really don't want to keep right now are all of these ones along the bottom. So from here, what we want to do is now go ahead and draw in these little arms on our clamp. So if I take a line, I'm just going to start to draw the rough shape of one of them and then mirror it over to the other side. Okay? So if I'm dimensioning these points, there's a couple of things that I know from looking at the drawings. So I can see that from this point to this point, this is going to be 10 millimeters. From here to here, this is going to be 6. And then from here to here, this is also going to be 6. So we've got some constraints all nice and lined up. This one here, this is going to be 8 millimeters, which also gives me a nice dimension there. And then I believe if I just add this dimension of 3, now we have our fully constrained arm. So the offset is only for where the rails actually come in contact with it. So my line is actually going to go from here to there. And then we can come back in and we can trim these two lines that were created by our offset. And now we have our fully dimensioned out part there. So what we could do is we could go ahead and just draw a line running down the center of our part. And I'm just going to go from the midpoint to the center of the circle because it's an easy reference. And then I can do the same thing. I can mirror this, all these features that I just made, right over to this side of my body there. Okay, and I just noticed that one of my sketches is not constrained, and I think it's from here. So if I go ahead and now trim this, now we have a fully constrained sketch. I'm not sure how that little end stuck out there, but it's always good to check because that could come back to bite you later. So now we've got a fully constrained sketch, and we'll go ahead and finish it. And well, that doesn't look quite right. Here we go. This is why we need to trim these two guys as well. Perfect. Okay, now we have our shape that we are looking for. So now we've got our clamp, we've got our base. So let's go ahead and hide these two bodies for now. And we will create our little knob there. So the knob, we see it's got a couple of dimensions there that we know. We have a center circle of 16.2 millimeters. And then we've kind of got a circle that is going to act as a path of 28.1. Okay, so we've got our circle and we have our little path around the center there. Okay, and we see that we've got 6 circles that are evenly spaced apart. Okay, so what we could do is grab our little circle, just make it tangent. And if we do that, we'll notice that the spacing has already been given to us. So our dimension there is already that 11.9, which is that radius of 5.95. So the only thing we have to do is just make U horizontal with U, and now we have a fully constrained circle there. We can then go ahead and create a circular pattern for this about this here center point, and we want 6 of them to be done. Last thing that we need to do is just create the little circles that connect the two. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a circle, and this one has a radius of 10, so a radius of 5, so a diameter of 10, excuse me. And we'll just go ahead and add some tangent constraints to this one and to that one. Okay, and then once I have this little tangent circle, I'm going to go ahead and create my circular pattern one more time about the center point and then do 6 millimeters. Now I have the exact spacing, and this kind of looks a little crazy right now. And we could go in and trim it. However, typically when you do that, it tends to mess with the constraints that you applied. So I'm actually just going to leave all of these clusters of circles and just be careful when I'm extruding. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my sketch. And then I can kind of see the shape that I want living in the center there. So I'm just going to go ahead and extrude out only the outer portion of my knob and leave this center circle kind of cut away in there. I'm going to extrude that out by 10. And then I'm going to re-reveal my sketch and then extrude out everything out the other way, 5, and just join it to the thing. And I should have made this a component, but I will just go ahead and do that now. Oops. Create a component, and then I will rename this component to be my knob. Wonderful. Now we have that component all done and dusted. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that. The last component that I am going to add is the little foot for my clamp there. So this one, I'm going to use the revolve tool when I'm creating this one. So if I go ahead and just create a little shape here. So I'll start in the middle, draw out my little half of my foot there. My foot has a diameter on the bottom of 20, so I'm going to make this line 10. Up here, it's got a diameter of 9.7, so I'm just going to do 9.7 divided by 2. And I am then going to make this height 5 millimeters. Okay, now I just got to add the little spot where my screw will fit into. So I'm just going to go down, go over, and then give this the dimension of 4 that it needs. And that should be it. Now if I go ahead and revolve this about this side axis here, now I have my foot, which is great. So I'll go ahead and create a component from this, call it my foot. Okay, Now I've got all of my components that I do not need to add for McMaster-Carr. The last one is just that McMaster-Carr screw. So I will go ahead and add in those materials. So I'll go ahead and, or add in that component, excuse me. So I'll go insert McMaster-Carr Components, and then I will search up the part number right there. So we've got our screw. We'll go ahead and we'll open the 3D step file. And now we've got our screw. And we just need two of them. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste that. And we also need two knobs. So we'll go ahead and we'll copy and paste that, and we'll just capture the position. Okay, I have all of my components now in my model. What I'm going to do before I start to assemble them is just to assign the materials to everything else. Okay, so if I were to just assign that ABS plastic to everything, then I can start to add the correct joints and relationships between everything. Okay, so to do this, there's a couple of different orders of operation that we could do. I think the first thing that I want to do is just figure out what parts are fixed and what parts are meant to, and attach those to their designated spots. Okay? For my knobs, I can see that both of my knobs are just going to be fixed into the center of my screws there. So I'll select my highest circle and then just select the very back of my knob. And we'll see that just snaps right into place right there. And now we have one done, and we'll do the same thing for this second one that we're trying to make there too. Bam. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go ahead and add in my little slider joint here. So I'm going to actually start, I want to give myself a good 0 point. So when I'm assigning my joint, I'm going to actually start at this little corner here. Start at that corner right there and assign it to this little corner in my slider. Okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to shift it a little bit to remove my offset. So I want to start, I want to start by redefining my offset. So 0.5 up and then 0.5, oops, 0.5 that way as well to redefine my offset. So now that's looking all good. And then I am going to give myself a slider. Okay. And with this slider, obviously we are going to need to give ourselves some constraints and a minimum and maximum. Okay, so my minimum, I believe I want my minimum to be, so we want our minimum to be that 10 and our maximum to be that 30 millimeters. And then if we do that and click OK, we'll see that we now have a slider that only slides along our rail, which is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. Okay, now I am going to go ahead and add, sometimes when you're doing these joints, you have to kind of think about where you want to add the joints themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually attach my foot. So I'm going to attach my foot to the bolt. This is also just kind of meant to live fixed in place. So I'm going to attach the center of my foot to the center of the hat. And I don't want that one to be a slider. I want that one to be rigid. Okay. But I do want to also have a motion that slides this one up and down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to just turn off the modeling for these threads for just a moment. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to edit my feature and just turn off the modeling bit, just so that I can go ahead and accurately assign those joints that I need. So if I do a joint from the center of that circle there to now just the little center of this little rim here, we'll see that that's the one that kind of moves. So maybe I'll do that the opposite way. Maybe instead I will start with the little outer rim of my foot and bring it on over to the center of that. Okay, and I see that it's currently upside down, so I want to go ahead and flip it, and then I'm going to go ahead and assign my slider joint to this one as well. And again, this helps give me a good 0 because you see how right now it's going through the top and bottom. We don't want that, so we want to give it a maximum and a minimum. And we want our maximum to just be that 40 millimeters because we want to take away the height of our little thing there. And I just realized it's going backwards, so we want our minimum to be 40. And you'll see that now it just butts right up into the side there. You click OK. And now we have a slider that goes up and hits the stop and then is good to go. All right, the last thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and assign a revolve joint from the screw. And I'm going to go ahead and assign it to the back of this one. So again, I'm going to turn off the modeling for my threading so that I can actually assign the joint properly. And I am going to joint the very back of my screw here at the center point to this one right there. And we don't want that one to be a slider. We want this one to be a revolute. And we'll actually go ahead and, just for the sake of visually understanding what's happening, we'll go ahead and we'll edit this joint and we will change this one to a revolute as well. Okay, and now that we have all of our joints assigned, now we can go ahead and add our motion links. So to do this, we will go ahead and it's very easy to do this step. So we'll go ahead and we'll click assemble and then we'll click on motion link. We'll just capture this position for now, that's okay. And we just want it to assign a motion link. You just click on 2 joints that you want to assign it to. So for example, when I spin this revolute joint, I want this slider joint to activate as well. And you'll see that Fusion gives you a nice preview of what it's going to look like as it kind of goes through. So once you do that, you can go ahead and click OK. And now you'll see you have that fully defined slider joint. And then we'll do that same thing for the bottom one. So we want this as we spin this revolute joint. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing. As we assign this revolute joint, we will click on this slider, and now we've got the same thing going there. So that's a little bit about how the motion link works. And that's very helpful for simulating how the actual functionality of your designs will all come together.